Hi, welcome to the orchard. Today we're going to look at how you successfully establish fruit trees, and we'll be covering what you need to do, the 5 sort of key things you need to look at when you're establishing a fruit tree. And the important thing to remember is everything that you do to the tree, particularly at the start, is going to have an effect on how well that tree establishes itself in the ground and, starts to actually grow and produce a crop. And the more successful the establishment, the less casualties on the journey, the less things you'll lose, the less trees you'll lose, and the less material you'll waste. So this is Moorcroft, which is a peri-pear tree. It's been in the ground about 6 years, and it's on quite a vigorous rootstock. It's on the wild pear rootstock. It has grown very well. I'm pleased with the shape, and it's established itself well. So let's have a look at the first thing you need to do when you want to establish a fruit tree. It's all about plant protection and plant support. So this tree has got a number of components to ensure its stability. When we planted it, we put in a 16mm rebar. It's 2 meters long originally. It's been hammered into the ground, and that leaves about 1.25 meters, 4 foot. The reason that we have this rebar here is 2 reasons really. Number one, windrock. You can see how that tree moves. That tree is flexing in the wind. There's a lot of sort of arguments about staking trees. Some people think you should stake low, some people think you should stake very high, and they tend to use wooden stakes. We find they last maybe a year, 2 years, and then they break. So the first thing is that flex with the rebar is really helpful, so it lets the tree build itself up. So the windrock is one thing, but the second thing we have here are the grazing animals. We have sheep, and sheep tend to buffet this, and they'll move the tree around, and that rebar won't snap. So that's very important. You need to have that there as the spine that everything else hangs off. The second thing that we've got is the guard inside that tree, which is a plastic guard. It's porous, and it allows the light through. Now that's very important when you're establishing trees. Young trees really benefit from airflow. You don't get the diseases building up, you don't get the condensation, and as a result of this guard, we see very good establishment. And I'll show you on a couple of other trees what good establishment looks like on a young tree. Inside that guard, we've actually got a vole guard, which is a small piece of green mesh wrapped around the trunk. Not so important on peri-pears because voles tend not to attack them, but definitely important on apples, where you will have problems. And then we've got the membrane below the ground, which you can't see, which really helps the roots because it keeps the moisture in. Gives us about a month's worth of rain. If it doesn't rain, that small piece of membrane, that semi-permeable membrane, really keeps the moisture around the roots up and makes all the difference, which is why we don't use irrigation. The final thing is we've got these ties, which I'll talk about later. So these rubber ties are very important. When the tree gets above this mesh, which it may do in a couple of years, or it may already be that high, it's really important to put these ties on. And I've used quite thick ties, and what they're doing is they're protecting the bark of the tree from the top of the mesh, and they're really adding to the support. And they'll stay on for a number of years. Very important that you put those on. If you don't put them on, you'll get terrible damage to the tree, which probably leads to canker and gummosis, which you don't want to see. And that leads us on to this outer mesh, which just really protects the tree from the sheep. So the next thing you need to really worry about to establish a fruit tree is to remove any rootstock suckers. What are rootstock suckers? Well, this is the rootstock down here at the base of the tree, and these have grown out of that. These are quince shoots, which are really taking energy away from the growth of the tree. So there's a bit of competition going on. We want all of the energy to go into the tree itself, not into the suckers. And you can see this is the top of the tree and it's starting to grow very well. So once this tree's leafed up, I'll be cutting those off. And that's really important when you're establishing a fruit tree. So number 3 to establish a tree is on this growth here, you can see there are side shoots that have come up. And unlike the suckers, leave them on, but just shorten them back in the summer because they will give you extra sugar and they help to thicken up the stem, and they will promote the top growth. As long as you don't allow them to dominate, they will really help your tree. So leave those on for now. So the 4th thing that's really important is to remove the flower buds on young trees for the first 5 years. You might think it's great to see blossom on young trees and be really pleased and even allow them to have fruit. But if you do one thing in your orchard this year, remove the flower buds of young trees. It's the most important thing you can do. And the reasons are to do with competition within the plant. When a fruit tree produces blossom, there's a hormone that has a massive effect that forms inside the bloom. It's called auxin, and that auxin will control the roots of the plant. So what happens is the tree becomes very auxin dominated as the flowers start to form their seeds inside the fruits. That switches the roots off, and there's a hormone in the root called cytokinin. Cytokinin should be the hormone that dominates the plant. If it dominates the plant, it will allow the plant to produce long extension growth, healthy growth, and it won't be inhibited by the flowers. If you leave the flowers on for the first 5 years, what you'll do is you'll stunt the growth, and in some cases you'll actually kill the tree. And I've seen this where branches have had blossom on when they're too young and the whole tree's withered up and died. And that really controls establishment. So make sure you remove them. And this is the tool that I use. It's a bamboo cane with a blade embedded in the end. And I just literally go into these trees and cut off the blossom like that. Just literally slice it off. And it does take a little while to do a tree. But believe me, it's the most important thing you'll do this year. The fifth and final tip is that it's actually possible to foliar feed young fruit trees from the ground level, and that has such a number of benefits for plant establishment. First of all, when you foliar feed young trees, the leaves absorb the nutrients directly, very quickly, and that protects them from things like fire blight infection. It allows the leaves to convert the ammonium in them very quickly to protein, and that stops you getting mites in the leaves. It also helps against aphid damage because you're promoting very, very healthy growth. And it also allows the roots to emit a lot more sugar because everything works extremely efficiently with foliar feeding. That has a massive effect on establishment. You get long shoots of high carbon wood, which are frost proof as well. So that's the most important thing to remember. Young trees for the first 5 years, when they're young, really benefit from foliar feeding. So those are our 5 top tips to optimise the establishment of a fruit tree in your orchard. If you've enjoyed these videos that we're doing, maybe you'd like to watch the one we did on fruit tree guards, or possibly on how to plant a fruit tree.